as deep into my life as possible and dying well. And that retained functionality is really critical as we extend our working lives deep into our 70s. And if I'm living until I'm 100 years old, that's 30 years of potential good health or ill health, which is based on decisions I make now in my 20s, 30s, and 40s, interestingly. I'm always interested in how many people log off when you bring up the 10 reasons you're dying slide. This is not a crowd pleaser, but slightly relevant that aging is a challenging process that begins the minute we're born, of course. And when we look at the hallmarks of aging as captured in the journal Cell, there's some fairly significant biological changes that go on during aging, and medicine's trying to find a way of blocking these, but it hasn't found a way yet. The only thing we know that really will block or change most of these comes back to lifestyle again. I can test your aging. I don't know if any of you have done a biological age through testing your telomeres, through the measurement of epigenetic changes, so how much damage your DNA accrues over time, or measurement of glycan age, where we look at another element of debris that attaches to your cells over time. There's a lot of people who want to test their well-being. I love that. The question is, what do you do with that? If I say I'm going to run your telomere blood test and you are 50 years old and your result comes back as 80, we've got a very awkward next 20 minutes. You're probably not going to enjoy that conversation because I haven't got 100 things to reverse that aging cycle. And a lot of people are worried about testing things they can't influence. Do we know why that 50-year-old is 80 and what are the implications for that in lifespan and quality of life? So there's a lot of testing going on. And I again, what my role earlier on in my career was being involved in the world's most advanced health assessment, which was, again, a significant ticket price to ultra high net worth individuals. And I did make it very clear that no one got healthier through a health assessment. Testing doesn't make you healthier. It's what you do with that information to transpose it into your physiology that matters. This graphic is relevant to longevity and the fact, when should I start being interested? And this is a concave view of an artery. So that's scooped away from you. And an artery, of course, a blood vessel that carries oxygenated blood away from your heart. So it's got a muscly wall. And along the bottom is a timeline. So at the beginning of that, on the left-hand side of the chart, that is an artery of a 10-year-old. And then we end up with the artery of someone in their 50s, which is blocked and has developed what we call an atherosclerotic plaque. And this is, of course, the biggest killer of humans worldwide. And when I was running stress ECGs, trying to find people developing heart disease, I was told that was a preventative test. We're going to prevent cardiovascular disease. And what I realized was, for me to get a positive result on that test, as in to find disease, the artery needed to look like the end of this picture, where it's nearly 85% blocked. And then my preventative role was I prevented you dying from that, hopefully. That's different to preventing this happening at all. And what's interesting about disease is it doesn't occur overnight. It develops over decades as a progressive degeneration of our physiology. And the earlier we're interested, the better the outcome. And here we have the very challenging concept that we're looking at that artery, that fatty plaque developing in the artery, and we're seeing that happening just after 10 years old. We're developing cardiovascular disease from our teens. It's manifesting in our 50s, 60s, 70s. So when I look at longevity, giving, again, infusions, when it's running, again, skin tightening protocols, longevity is about how I prevent the degeneration of my physiology and I interject strategically as early as possible, and the earlier the better. And, to make a success of old age, I have to start young. And who am I selling longevity to? 30, 35-year-olds, where I'm saying, for you to keep the capability you have now is going to be so much easier than to rebuild it age 70. I cannot even tell you how much easier it's going to be. And we can rebuild your capability at 70. And we can rebuild your capability at 80 and even 90, but it's harder. And when I look again at longevity, we tie ourselves back into state healthcare challenges, which is what percentage of my population are below a capability threshold, as in I need to deliver their food to them, as in they're unable to get out of bed, as in they're not able to cognitively answer a phone. And what we're looking at in life is really this clear understanding that life is good. And again, I don't know what the age demographic is joining us on Facebook and across the different channels, but if you're below 35, I would just say to you, just really enjoy that. It's great stuff. Have fun, go out with your friends. Your physiology is completely different to somewhere around after 35, when all your biological systems try to gradually slip away into the night. And this progressive degeneration of biological systems gets confusedly called aging. I'll talk about that in more detail, and there is hope on the horizon before this turns into a gloom fest. But really, what we're interested in is how do I delay, or we might say attenuate, the natural drop in my biology, my physiology, so I remain highly functional later into life and I die well. And that's going to come back to lifestyle. Now, many in the spa and wellness world might know this guy. Someone, I spoke about him a few weeks ago, and someone said, "Is that you, Ollie?" That's the greatest compliment I'll ever receive. I haven't got the same body fat as our fine Brian Johnson on the screen here, and he looks better in that hat than I do. But that's Brian Johnson, longevity pioneer, and he's interesting because he's doing everything that has ever been proven to maybe improve lifespan. So if a study on a rat showed that tickling behind the ear made that rat live an extra day, he'll get someone in tickling behind the ear. If there's a supplement that maybe works on mice studies or primate studies, he'll take it. He's basically running 155 supplements a day. He lives in a perfectly controlled physical, social environment to optimize longevity. And he's tracking it, he's trending it. And he's made a sort of hero out of some of the parameters he checks. Might that be gum inflammation, might be NAD levels, might be other. And he rolls this blueprint out as sort of a modern day manifesto of longevity practice. And again, even though I'm not with you, it's an important part in the talk where I've got to do a public service announcement. I hope no one's going to mind, but you shouldn't eat ice cream. And I'm sure there's some ice cream eaters, and I'm sure you want to know why you shouldn't eat ice cream. It's because you're more likely to be eaten by a shark. And I think the statistics show that to be very true, that in July, lots of people eat ice creams and lots of people are also eaten by sharks. So that must be causative. And here we find ourselves in an interesting place with longevity. How many of the things we're tracking are the ice cream shark relationship? They correlate. And how many are truly causative? And what am I choosing to focus on? And for me, again, this mistake because I can measure everything doesn't make everything relevant. What's relevant are the things that cause parameters. And that pushes us back, sadly, to some simple things, but excitingly. Physical activity is unequivocally sits at the top of the tree. And when people talk about exercise, they confuse several things. They confuse physical activity, which is my body's basic biological need to move. I need 5 minutes of movement out of every hour where possible. That's completely separate to my ability to manufacture strength through my muscle mass. My ability to climb a mountain using my cardiorespiratory fitness is completely different to my ability to stand on one leg and balance. Physical activity, just as a starter for one, is just what your body needs to work. If I don't move at all, then I won't circulate blood, I won't circulate oxygen, lethargy. If I don't move at all, I might get constipated because I have no gut motility. If I don't move at all, there's very little point in me putting on a continuous glucose monitor and tracking my glucose when I don't move, because where do I think the glucose is going to go from the carbohydrate in everything that I eat? Movement is the elixir of human physiology. It's nothing to do with calories. It's just something we need to combust. And if we can't move through some challenges or disability, we have to find a way to mimic some of the biomechanics of movement. That's separate to exercise. Someone says to me, Ollie, I'm pretty fit. I run on the Monday, I do pickleball on the Wednesday, and then I do spinning on the Saturday. And I go, great, but you've completely sort of ignored two biological systems, your mobility and flexibility and your strength. And your body doesn't really care what you like. Your body doesn't care what you're good at. What we have to reconcile is from the moment you're 35 or onwards, these three biological systems are going to deteriorate at a fairly standardized rate, decade on decade. And the key headline there is cardiorespiratory fitness. And this parameter that looks pretty dramatic, and here again, sharing with an unknown audience, me with my top off. I think you can get arrested for that now. So probably that's why I'm not sharing the slides. So that's me. And next to me is Anthony Joshua. I thought I'd pick my physical equivalent for this picture. And principally Anthony Joshua, world heavyweight champion. We're both doing a cardiopulmonary exercise test, or CPET, and we're capturing two things. Heart health, put that in a box. We're measuring oxygen. And what we're measuring is we cycle as hard as we can. And then the last minute, how much air went into our lungs and how much air came out and how much oxygen was missing. And the oxygen missing would be correlated with my ability to work. This is called VO2 max. And if you're in and around the longevity space, you'll have heard this phrase. If you haven't, you must. VO2 max is the volume of oxygen I can consume per kilogram in 1 minute. And here is the key piece. This is the single best number to predict how long you're going to live. The single best number. And what's interesting about VO2 max is it's being drawn into the world of performance sport because it would correlate with who's going to do best in a triathlon, or who's going to run the 10K, maybe the fastest. But at the other end of the spectrum, it's also critical to say which of us shouldn't go for complex surgery. which of us won't survive an anesthetic? Because this isn't a performance parameter. This is a physiological parameter. Think of the illness-wellness continuum. This is how well your body works to deliver and consume oxygen, which is the tissue that keeps you on this planet. And because it correlates with athletic performance, means we've lost all sight of who should be measuring it and why. And who should be measuring it? Every single person. And why? Because it's the biggest reason you'll stay on this planet. And it will deteriorate 10% per decade after 35 and 15% after 50. And if you do not utilize cardiorespiratory exercise, think endurance, on a fairly frequent basis, that deterioration will be marked. And the biggest feature of how well you are functional later in life will be your building and keeping of this VO2 max. Second to that is how much muscle you have and how strong you are with the muscle you possess. And still, my heart breaks when I walk into a large-scale gym and I see the average age of people, 23, 24. I'm like, these people want it, but they're not the highest need group. I'll tell you who is. Everyone. Body mass index, we know, is a sort of fairly arbitrary figure. I know body mass index is a way of quantifying states or countries, and their weight management is very robust. As an individual tool, not much merit, because no one is unwell through excessive weight. They're unwell through the presence of excessive body fatness, that body fat tissue being abdominal and intra-abdominal, and inadequate volume of muscle mass. So I can't talk to anyone about weight without talking about composition. Your tissue composition is what will define whether you're healthy or not your weight on the scales. And this is separate to how you want to look and your aesthetic and your brand. This is just pure play physiology. And the reality here is most people don't know how much muscle they have and the value of muscle. And I go back one slide. This ugly looking graph, which no one wants to see, is relevant for a quick reason. As you get older, at the top of the chart, you're more likely at the bottom of the chart to get cardiovascular disease, think heart attacks and strokes. Why? Well, aging correlates with more fatigue, the bubble below, more muscle weakness, more reduced endurance capacity, I can't do as much, and muscle wasting. And that causes a cascade of things that end up with irritated blood vessel walls and that problem with disease. Why this horrible graph? Well, it's interesting because I would put muscle wasting above aging. Muscle wasting causes fatigability, muscle weakness, and endurance. It's not an equal component, it's the cause. And muscle wasting as we age is a major problem. I lose 10% VO2 max 35 onwards, 15% at 50. I lose 3 to 5% of my total muscle mass each decade after 40, a condition called sarcopenia that is often misunderstood as aging. And if you look at the biggest difference between me in my deep 40s and my dad in his mid 80s, it will be his VO2 max and his muscle mass, not what it says on his passport. Now, that's a challenge for a multitude of reasons, but that's why Brian Johnson is obsessive about resistance training and cardio, obsessive. And for all the things he promotes and talks about, those are the big things. Lots of things he's talking about are ice creams and shark attacks. Here I'm telling you the reason that people are truly struggling is the loss of these two biological systems. And this idea, again, quality affected life years, how many years I'll be unwell, will be largely determined by whether I can get out of my chair and get to the shops, not by some marker of cellular aging as determined by a lab in California. This becomes increasingly irrelevant with the GLP-1 horizon. So we have GLP-1 agonists, which are an extraordinarily effective drug. And I spoke a lot to the UK fitness industry and certainly Europe, and I speak to them about GLP-1 and they put their arms like this, like, you know, it's for lazy people. A, it's not, and B, it's extraordinarily effective. You know, it's, yes, there's question marks over unknown unknowns, but our known knowns are this will take weight off far more effectively than any nutritional or, again, behavior-led activity that's gone in the past, and it will get better and better and oral and cheaper, and it will rise. Why is this relevant? Because the only real, at the moment, straw hat on which you could attack GLP-1s is the proportion of weight lost from muscle mass is greater on these medications than when you lose weight naturally. We see about 40% of my weight loss being muscle compared to 20% where it might be on a traditional weight loss. And that will vary across ages and stages and activity levels. If I take a 100-kilogram male and I lose him 10 kilograms of weight and 8 kilograms of that weight have been muscle, he is far less healthy at 90 than he was at 100. Muscle tissue is the elixir of life. It's critical. The only way you can convince your body to keep muscle is to load it up, and that is strength training. Sad, but true. You know, when someone says, I like exercise, that's great. I like that you like it. That helps with behavioral adherence, but we all need it. And when we look back to UK government guidelines, they say I need 150 minutes of cardio, 2 strength training sessions, 2 mobility sessions. And not or. because these three different biological systems all need attention. And that means I also need mobility. One of the best predictors of life expectancy is how many times you touch the floor trying to get from sitting to standing. The more times you touch, the weaker you are, the stiffer you are, the less mobile you are. And that's a cascade into you'll move less and you will unfortunately not be able to preserve life as effectively. Functional movement screens are rife for working out who can move well to to do cardiovascular endurance exercise, to load up muscle mass. And the idea that this is the preserve of the fit is a fallacy. This is the preserve of everybody above the age of 35. And here are graphs that show you're expected to get worse year on year. And when I would run biological tests on people, they'd say, Ollie, what's the average? I said, well, the average is that people are dying too young from dysfunction. The ideal is you keep these biological systems as high as possible for as long as possible. The graph on the left here is interesting with the green, the red, so the green, the black, and the red. That's VO2 max deteriorating. So untrained VO2 max. But the person in green started with a higher training volumes. They had a VO2 max in their 60s. And by the time they are 80, they're living independently, going to the shops. The person with a VO2 max of 25 in their 30s is no longer around in their late 60s. It's that strong a correlation. VO2 max, again, we've got great data on males just because there always is more studies run on males. They've been easier to study for a multitude of reasons. But male data from a Copenhagen study showed if I increase your VO2 max by 1 milliliter per kilogram, think 2%, small increase, you get 45 days extra life expectancy. And that's the only parameter which works independently of improving blood pressure, cholesterol, other. It's an extraordinary figure. And VO2 max is the only figure where the higher the better. Body fat, if it goes too low, it's a problem. Flexibility, if it's too flexible, it's a problem. Glucose too high, problem, too low, problem. Blood pressure too high, problem, too low, problem. Not VO2 max. Only number in human physiology that higher is better. It's extraordinary. People ask me, Ollie, what do? You look extraordinarily fit and well. No one says that to me. But I do get asked, what do I do? I do the least amount possible, right? Because I live in the wellness industry, and it's not wellness isn't my passion. It's my passion to understand it, communicate it. But my hobbies are my passion. My family's my passion. Not going to a gym for 3 hours on a Saturday. I go to the gym. I do the exercise as little as I can to sustain the biological capability that I want year on year. And every year I have to work a little bit harder to keep these numbers. I want a VO2 at 48. I want 41 kilograms of muscle. And when I do a movement screen, I want to score over 85 out of 100. And I do the exact minimum amount I can possible to keep an eye on those parameters. One I track through Whoop, another one I check at a lab, another one I check again independently. These are now available in ways that they just weren't available 10 years ago. And that's really an interesting piece for us as a sector. Longevity can't be complete without nutrition. We would know that for my longevity to be managed, I must manage inflammation, and our two sort of horsemen of inflammation would be poor gut health and dysregulated blood glucose. I put this up there because, again, in running complicated health assessments for years, I run everything from organic acid, continuous glucose monitoring, gut microbiome. And I'm sort of like, well, why am I measuring this if in your questionnaire you don't eat enough fiber? What do you expect me to see? In the same way as why would I run a fitness test on someone who doesn't move? What do you expect me to see? So when someone wants complicated nutritional analytics, I go, we can do that. Let's just check that you get 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of your body weight. Let's just check you get 30 grams of fiber a day. Let's just check over the week you eat 30 different plant-based foods. And let's just double check that you take 15 minutes to eat a meal. And if they don't check those things, what do you want me to test? What do you expect me to find? And the absence of nourishment is a catastrophic challenge to UK populations and global. 70% of the calories in the UK, ultra-processed food. So ultra-processed defined as 5 or more ingredients, and I couldn't make it in my kitchen. So it's not a lasagna or a ratatouille. It's got emulsifiers in it. It's got binding agents, colorings, etc. Why is this relevant? Well, the big nutrient stripped out of ultra-processed food is fiber, because that's the one I have to chew. That's the one that stops me getting an immediate dopamine feedback loop of pleasure and satiety. So I'm confused by my diet. It's not telling me I'm full. It's telling me to eat more, and it's removing the key nutrient that stabilizes my blood glucose levels and feeds the bacteria that live in my large intestine, giving me the opportunity for a robust immune system and robust neurotransmitters and mood state. If I think about longevity, I'll be drawn back to fasting, a great, again, divisive element. We've got great debates on fasting. You've got some biological sex differences with Dr. Mindy Peltz and Stacey Sims, challenging the assumption that female biology reacts to fasting in the same way as male biology. And there's some good studies to understand that. There's no good human trials on fasting, really. They're mostly based on rats. But the idea is if we want to live longer, the only thing we know that works is calorie restriction. So if I burn 2,500 calories, I need to eat less than that. And that slight state of mild starvation triggers a range of biological benefits that clean out old debris cells, stabilize blood glucose, support gut health. And fasting is a methodology of doing that calorie restriction. Because if I only eat in an 8-hour window, statistics would say I don't eat as much as I eat in a 12-hour window. There's a sort of human play to that. Nothing is a magic bullet. Nothing's a longevity quick fix. There's nuance to it around, well, have I got a good relationship with food? What do I eat in my 2 meals? And can I be nourished from 2 meals, whereas I previously took 3? I can't go into that, but it's just food for thought on this talk. And again, if we take the words of Michael Pollan, the journalist who wrote about food, he said, eat real food, mostly plants, slowly. And really, for all the advanced nutritional testing I've been involved in, we don't get much past that, even at the sharp end of the stick. And can I be well without sleep? The answer would be unlikely. 7 hours sleep is the sort of minimum. 7 to 9 is the banded guidelines. Why 7 hours? Because loads of things will go on tonight when you're asleep that can't go on today during the day. You can't clear the debris from your brain that builds up during the day while your brain is still active. You can't grow while you're busy. You can't regulate your immune system while your energy is expended in different directions. There's at least 10 biological processes that require taking place overnight. If you get the average in the UK, that's 6 hours 20, you are not going to fulfill those biological tasks. And when that symptom turns up somewhere else, someone will treat that symptom or sell you a well-being paper to cover it up. The reality is sleep sits at the heart of any well-being strategy, and sleep is being assaulted from a lack of morning light to inconsistent waking sleeping times, from a distortion relationship with physical activity, from mismanagement of caffeine, misunderstanding of alcohol, from inconsistent sleep times and going to bed hot, going to bed in the light, going to bed in the presence of stimulus, and forgetting the very premise of sleep, which is safety. If you don't feel safe tonight, don't expect to go to deep sleep. Why would you? How could you go to a state of deep vulnerability when you yourselves believe you are vulnerable? So sleep is challenged. 61% in the UK don't sleep well. Half of that, at least, I would say much, much more, is behaviorally induced sleep insufficiency. And so therefore, a longevity clinic would drive at sleep. And this is what Brian Johnson does. He sleeps obsessively, routine, darkness, bright, light, cool. He eats minimal calories across diverse nutrients, targeting gut health, targeting nourishment, but never targeting calories. He weight trains like a beast. He cardio trains like a beast. And that is the stone. Everything else, broadly, are the ripples in the water when he drops that stone in. I won't go too much into those because I'm conscious of time. There's lots of exciting things going on. NAD, again, this element involved in cellular energy production, it deteriorates as we age. Does replenishing it or driving more of the precursor elicit a benefit? Interesting and exciting times. Light therapy, red light, photobiomodulation, near infrared, two potent forms of anti-inflammatory modalities, combined with far infrared or heat through Finnish sauna, extremely exciting to manipulate the variables involved in aging and being well. You've probably seen the Finnish sauna study that 4 saunas of 20 minutes or more over a week 50% reduction in cardiovascular disease. So you will be aware that heat and light are vital components of the modern spa or wellness intervention. Peptides, these short chain amino acids that again can elicit biological benefit, are getting cleverer and more advanced, but regulation is lagging. We've got, again, people doing personalized hormone management and mapping, hyperbarics. They're interesting. These are the ones I've just put down that from a longevity point of view, the data suggests they're absolutely worth exploring. They seem to be in the do no harm, offer opportunities. And as spa providers, operators, our consumers will be asking for these. Headline summary: if you work in the preservation of muscle mass and increasing cardiorespiratory fitness, and you help people sleep and you help people nourish, you are a longevity clinic, probably far more effectively than someone who tests it and measures it, but doesn't change it. It's more interesting to change physiology than it is to quantify it and measure it. Big things: VO2 max, stabilize muscle mass, move clean, make sure that blood glucose and gut health are optimized through a high fiber plant-based diet, prioritize the mechanisms that preserve sleep from the moment you wake, and remember to start with what you're trying to achieve, not with the product that glistened most brightly as it walked into your office and tried to sell itself to you. And that is a whistle stop. That's got to be the most slides ever in that window of time. I think I stopped sharing. Is that right?
Wow, wow, wow. And when I say wow, it's with 3 W's like World Wellness Weekend. Thank you so very much, Ollie. So, yeah, I have to say that slide about 10 reasons why you die, it's not really a great social conversation starter, but it does get people thinking. And thank you so much for going over sleep, nutrition, movement, also mindfulness, resiliency, which are really the four pillars of wellness according to World Wellness Weekend.